Welcome back to Welsh Miniature Wargamer, and this is my second episode of Oldy Paints the Oldies. So I put up a post on my channel where everybody can vote on what I will paint up next, and this is the guy who won out on that poll. Actually, most people, over 50%, voted for this guy, so he was the clear winner. And as you can see, he's a really cool looking dude. I really like the pose, etc. And yeah, I can see why the younger me picked this guy up back in the day. He's dynamic looking, he's got a lot of detail, he looks rather cool, etc. Buying him as a metal toy more than thinking of how am I going to paint it. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail further on. So first of all, it was made by a company called Hobby Products, the HP here, in 1989. Now Hobby Products were under their Metal Magic imports. They bought these miniatures in, and it's part of the Spacelords miniature range. So this actual miniature is called a Cybertech Wartech. And yeah, a lot of text going on there. But yeah, it's currently being remastered, if you will, or reissued under the EM4 miniature range. So if you're interested in these guys, you can go and check them out. Now both of these miniatures are like of the same group. I can't remember if they were in the same blister originally or not. I think maybe they were, but I can't be 100% sure. But seeing that I've got them both, and they're both, you know, from the same force, if you will, made by the same company, got those same helmets as I'm pointing out there, I'm going to sort of paint them up at the same time, and we'll see what we get out of there. Now for its time, I'm going to say that it was very ambitious miniature. This is a metal miniature, so it's a metal cast miniature using white metal. So what I like about old miniatures, generally speaking, is they're usually much more plainer. There's a lot less detail, and you know, it makes painting them much more joyful. Now this guy, I think, was pushing the limits of what you could do with those sort of metal, you know, old, I can't even think of the word for it now, the metal sort of made miniatures back from the late 80s, early 90s, because there's so much detail on these guys. It is unbelievable. So I think they were pushing the limits of how much detail they could squeeze into the mold, etc. And did it work out? As a model, it looks really interesting. As a painter's model, no, I don't think it really did work out. And you'll see me get more disenfranchised with this miniature the further it goes on. There's just bits everywhere, as I'm trying to point out here. There's like 10 little knobbly bits on his legs. I can't really see what they're meant to be. They're just like little panels that have just stuck on his legs, like just gribbly bits thrown on for no apparent reason. And I think he could have done with a little bit of sort of, you know, a bit less detail. It would have worked a bit better for him. So the first colour I'm going to use is a Vallejo model colour, dark sea blue. Now this is the first time I've ever had this. My dark sea blue, the new one, isn't the same shade as my old one, which is really quite annoying, and I've never had it happen with Vallejo before. So yeah, it might be a bit of a problem as I start running out of my older colours. It's got a much more green tone than the old dark sea blue, which was much more of a blue tone. So yeah, I'm going to try and paint up this guy with, we're going to say, like, he hasn't got any under armor, because I can't really work out what isn't armor on this dude. But I'm going to paint sort of the lower levels of his armor in this dark sea blue. Just, you know, sort of the legs, the arms, etc. We'll try and leave all the little jiggery biggery bits out of it, and we'll do them as different as we go on. So yeah, trying to paint around them is probably almost impossible, because they're so tiny, these little things. So if I hit them, I'm not really that worried. I'll pick them up later and, you know, maybe highlight them, etc. Although maybe they'd be better just being left alone. So then we go to our cork brown, again a Vallejo model colour. This is my go-to for like a base tone for the skin, etc. So I'm going to go all over the face to get a nice coat. Now I'm going to probably need to do it a couple of times because I'm going over a very dark grey black colour, which I chose as my base coat or my undercoat because I wanted to paint this guy in sort of darker tones. So I'm figuring, you know, if I miss bits because of all this detail that's on this little guy, it won't show up quite so badly. Yeah, that's what my thinking was at this point. Although, really, there was no there was no way I was going to get all of this guy. You can tell I'm already starting to feel quite traumatized by this miniature. So trying to paint the face in, yeah, the detail on the face has seemed pretty decent. You know, it doesn't look bad at all. It's quite, you know, he has got a nose, which is a thing that some of the older miniatures did have a problem with. So this guy actually does have a nose, which is cool. So then we go to the Vallejo model colour Elfic Flesh. So this is a very off-white sort of colour. And I'm going to do this for the teeth. Now, to begin with, I started to try and paint in each individual tooth, which I try and do if I can, but really the sculpt isn't good enough for me to be able to pick out individual teeth. So I'm going to paint the whole inside of his mouth. Now, unfortunately, that gives him this sort of horror character Mr. Smile look about him. So I'm going to have to clean it up with my cork brown in order to keep the shape of his mouth, etc. And of course I'm going to have to do something about it later, but for now we'll move on and do the visor. So I'm thinking at this point I'm going to do the visor this colour, and then I'm going to use shades in order to pick out shadows, etc., moving across the visor on top of his head. Unfortunately that does not work out. So later I will explain what happens, but for now this is one way I'm going. I'm going to show you my mistakes so that you can see my mistakes. I want to show you, you know, full transparency. I go this way and then change it as I go on. So Vallejo model colour blue grey. That's blue, grey, pale. Okay, why am I stumbling on my words today? Okay, so we're going to water it down because the crafty mini goes on at me for not watering down my paints enough. And on his helmet, he has this sort of bisected panel sort of running down the middle. So yeah, I want to sort of draw my eye to that a bit more. I'm going to draw two straight lines going either side of it, just to give some interest. And yeah, this is where most people are going to be seeing this miniature from, this sort of angle. So I'm being very careful to try and draw the line in without going over the little lines which are formed in the helmet, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Probably not, but you know, I'm trying to put two lines down his helmet which, you know, they are actually sculpted in. So we're going to try and do that. Here you can see it maybe a little bit better, that there is a dip down the middle of the helmet. That's what I'm trying to say, yes? Okay. Now obviously we're using a light colour over a dark colour, so we're going to have to do a few coats, but I'm trying to keep the line as sort of perfect as I can with my wibbly hands, and trying to keep it from going over into the dark spots. You know, when you're doing straight lines on a helmet or on armor, etc., obviously you want it to be as true to a straight line as possible, because if it looks wiggly or, you know, slightly off, it does really sort of get enhanced and magnified when you look at the miniature. You can see that it's hand drawn, and kind of these sort of paint, you know, this sort of armor, you wouldn't have thought that it would be like hand painted by someone. You know, they would be using masking tape, etc., and spraying them and what have you. So we wanted to try and look as true a line as possible, as to keep it nice and neat. So I must say, painting up the helmet was quite joyful. I actually had no qualms with painting up the helmet. There was a nice smooth area here where I could spread the paint out nicely and not have any sort of inclusions from the casting process, etc. Unlike the visor. Okay, so I'm going to mention it now. So the visor, like I said, I was going to use washes in order to mimic shadows, etc., but that didn't work out because of the inclusions and the imperfections in the metal from the casting process. It wasn't exactly 100% smooth, so all it was doing was gathering in all the nooks and crannies on this meant to be smooth glass visor, so it made it look quite awful. So I'll mention it a bit more as we go on. But for now, I'm going to do all of the pads that he's got. So he's got these little shoulder pads, or big shoulder pads, which kind of goes under the neck, so it's kind of like a collar as well. So I will need to hit that part of the miniature also. So like I said, because I've used a dark colour, I'm not terribly upset if I don't hit a part of the shadow where I think it would be in the shadows. It would look quite natural to have this darker shade underneath. So I'm also hitting up the elbow pads, etc., you know, trying to get them all the same colour, trying to add colour to this guy and trying to separate the armour from, well, he's all covered in armour, so I'm trying to separate the bulkier looking armour from the under armour, if you will. Although, like I said, this guy's more like a knight. I would say that is a good description, actually. He's like a knight, so he's wearing armour all over him, so it's very hard to differentiate what part is more armoured than others. But, you know, I'm trying to find the sweet spot for him. So like these little pads on the back of his hands, you know, I'm thinking, you know, modern day army soldiers often have like hardened plastic on the back of their hands. So, you know, I'm thinking like that maybe this would be a different colour because it's a different type of plastic, you know, or different type of metal, whatever you want to call it. So like I said earlier, this guy really kind of pushes my limits for my patience, to be honest. He has got an awful lot of junk on him, and it gets quite tedious at times. You know, it's the thing that I love about old miniatures, like I said, that they don't have so much junk on them, but this guy really does have a load of junk on him, and maybe the process of casting back then wasn't up to the task really to be pulling off what they were asking of it. So I'm thinking this weapon now has got some sort of like, I don't know, like a plasma type looking thing. So I'm going to paint these bits in with the same blue just to give me a nice light colour to put down some inks and washes later to try and make it pop a bit more. So now we have the Vallejo model colour yellow olive, which is kind of like an army colour green. Now this I'm going to be using just to bring in some colour into the miniature, you know, something other than these sort of greyish blacks and that sort of colour, you know, some actual vibrancy. So we're going to paint the rifle this colour to make it pop out a little bit from the armour, because at the moment it's kind of sinking in to the armour and becoming just a grey mess, really. So a bit of green, you know, that kind of looks like the alien style pulse rifle colour, you know, that sort of classic green weaponry. So I'm making sure I hit all of the spots on the weapon, and there are some like hidden. Some of it hasn't really formed very well in the casting, but I will try and like paint it up, sort of fake it until it makes it type thing. I'll also paint up some pouches just to break up the grey again, because he's looking very overwhelmingly grey at the moment. So I don't know if I've said while I've been painting this, I really didn't enjoy this process as much as I... Painting miniatures is my zen, and I love painting miniatures. It's where I'm happiest, and I really had troubles being happy painting this guy. So yeah. So yeah, we're going to use the model, the Vallejo Sepia Shade, and we're going to use this sort of colour to just dial back the face a little bit and to fill in a little bit of that sort of the mouth, etc. You know, because at the moment he does look very piranha-ish. So we're going to hit all over the skin tone and the teeth just to bring them back down. Yeah, he has got a bit of sort of yellow teeth now, but that doesn't really matter. You're not going to be able to see it terribly, and if I feel terrible about it, I'll remove a bit like this just to remove a bit of the wash away from the mouth. So then using GW, yes, I do own some GW, not much, but I do own some GW, and this is the non-oil, so just a black wash. So this is where I discovered that actually the glass on his visor isn't perfectly smooth. It's got sort of little wrinkles in it from the casting process, and as you can, I think you can probably see here, I'm trying to work it really hard, watering down the ink, etc., or the shade rather, and trying to move it around, but it is not looking good. It's not mixing the way I want it to mix, and it's sort of gathering in strange spots, and that's because there is that sort of bumpiness to the visor. I put it on that plasma detailing. I put it on also the gap in his mouth, kind of to try and fill in between the teeth. Now it's kind of not worked that great, but you know, I'm not gonna worry too much about it now. While we got it out, I'm gonna sort of dab it down onto the light blue armor that we've done to add some shade where I muck up. Obviously I just wipe it off with my thumb, etc. But we're just going to add some shade. Now, don't worry about if this goes down a bit too heavily. We're going to come back anyway and pick it back up with some highlights. So we're not too worried. We just want to get some nice shade in. So with the Basalt Grey from Vallejo Model Color range. So we're going to use this to sort of dry brush, sort of a heavy dry brush I suppose, over the backpack, etc. Just hitting most spots just to get some interest and some variation in that sort of dark colour. Now I do want to sort of hit the top more than the bottom, obviously, because that's the way the light is hitting them, but I'm not caring if I hit things as I go. I don't know if that's because at this point I'm losing interest in doing this miniature, or whether I felt like it needed to pop out more because everything was kind of bland and sort of not really standing out that well. So using that colour again, I'm coming in and starting to paint out all those tiny little nubbins that he's got on his legs and all over his body. It's almost like his arm has got growths growing out of it. Yeah, so yeah, I'm just, you know, tidying up the lines that I did with the dry brush, which showed me kind of where I wanted to put these lines and sort of draw in a bit more detail, even though this miniature has already got way too much detail. But yeah, I'm sort of neaten it up a little bit. So back with the non-oil. Yep. Alright, so what we're going to try and do with my non-oil. So obviously I'm watering it down a bit on my palette, because GW for some reason don't like to use dropper bottles. And again, I'm trying to do this visor. I'm trying to get this visor looking right, and yeah, I just cannot get it to the non-oil to sit right. For a while I was wondering if there was something that I was mixing my non-oil wrong or something was up, but then it kind of dawned on me that it wasn't me, it was the miniature. So then I come back with the Vallejo Model Color Black, and I just decide, what the hell, let's just paint the visor black now. And I'll also paint up, while I'm here, the piping going around his body. So he's got quite a bit of like weird hose pipes sort of things attached to his backpack, from his backpack to his helmet, etc. So yeah, I'm going to try and catch all of those things to add a little bit more variation in shade if not colour. I don't think adding a lot of colour to this guy would look right, but adding a bit of some sort of variation in the shades probably will. So reaching into like the deepest recesses of the backpack, etc. I'm just catching those parts. And like I said, these weird little hoses which seem to go nowhere, but you know, we'll paint them in anyway. I'm going to paint his little microphone that he's got hanging down by his mouth, very Hicksish. And yeah, here it is. I painted the visor because I think having it just as a jet black visor would be preferable to the awful mess that I'd made of his sort of washed visor. Excuse me if you hear me sniffing away in the background. It's just become autumn, and of course I've caught my first cold of the season. So then we're going to Natural Steel, again by the Vallejo model range. So yeah, to try and get some sparkle to this dude, I'm going to paint this sort of, I don't know what it is, it's like a barrel, but it's on top of the weapon, so it's not a barrel. But this strange little pipe going across the top, and I'll paint up the actual barrel at the end of the gun too, just to give some sort of silvery highlight-ish, you know, something of interest, something which will pop from the rest of the model, because it is quite a dark miniature. He's not really standing out that well, so I'll pick out a few details here just to make him look a little bit less sort of boring, really. Again, picking out a few little details as we go, just to really willy-nilly just picking out stuff that may, you know, will look a different colour just for the sake of making it look a different colour. So the blue-grey pale, so we get the blue-grey pale, and we are going to be painting up with a bit of water. I've watered it down again. That's just for you, Crafty. So yeah, we're going to be hitting the raised areas of this armour, bringing it back up to this sort of colour. But you know, keeping some of the wash that we used to knock it back. But yeah, we want to brighten him up a little bit, so that's what we're doing. We're going over all of the armour panels, just bringing it back up to kind of the original colour. Now with this, I'm kind of more drawing it in than hitting any particular, you know, panel, etc. So I'm trying to think where the light would be hitting him from above, etc. Now I'm not terribly accurate with doing this, but I am trying to, you know, hit the edges, etc. And if there's a large open panel, I want to hit sort of the upper third of it, say, where the light will be hitting it, because otherwise the colour's not going to look right, you know, it's going to be too flat. So coming in with the helmet, that's where I'm trying to stay very careful again. I'm almost off camera, but you can kind of see me down in that corner. So drawing it in, yep, I get that sort of thing back. And as it's drying, I might decide to pick out a little bit more detail where it's starting to dry and start to dull down, obviously, as the paint starts to dry. So, Militarum Stupid Namus Greenus, contrast paint by Games Workshop. I don't know why they give them such stupid names. I'm going to go over the gun with this, just to add again some shade and depth to the weapon, so it's not just a flat green. Although because it's a, you know, it's a gun, most guns are kind of a flat colour. It wouldn't look out of place if you did keep it like that flat green, but you know, adding this, we'll add some shade, etc. You know, throw some shade on GW on the miniature. So, the Vallejo model color Vermilion. So, yes, it's really rich red color. So this I'm going to be really using just to bring out some, again, a bit more color, so he's not so black and white looking. You know, just the odd, like, he's got loads of little buttons on him and loads of little bulbs maybe. Yeah, at this point I'm like, yeah, let's just give him chicken pox. Dab red all over him wherever I feel like there are. He's got like these little control panels hanging down between his legs, etc., which is, it's just mad how they've done this miniature. So we're going to pale blue. So I'm adding it to that other pale blue grey, and I'm mixing it in with some water and getting a nice sort of slightly lighter shade of the same colour. Now this I'm going to be using as my highlight to just hit sort of the raised areas. So on the top of this is a little domed helmet. Obviously that's going to be directly in the light, so I want that to be really quite bright compared to the rest of him, and you know, I'm still trying to keep within the lines, but I'm covering a good 90%, maybe 95% of this band going down his helmet in this colour, because that's where the most light is going to hit. I'm sort of edge highlighting, if you will, the panels, just sort of making them pop, stand out from the rest of the armour. You know, if there's a large expanse of armour, like I say, I will add this colour just to break it up, you know, in little spots to yeah, break it up so it's not too flat looking, because this armour is very domed looking, even the pads on his arms and legs. So I'm hitting sort of the top third with this, you know, the edges, drawing in lines, etc. You know, just trying to have a bit of fun with him, because I'm struggling to enjoy painting this guy. Basalt grey, yeah. We're just using a bit more basalt grey, and with this we're going to hit up sort of again sort of a dry brush of the base, just sort of get something down there. To be honest, I should have chose a different colour base, because the base blends in with the armour, or the armour with the base, if you will. I suppose in real life, that's kind of perfect armour colour. It would be to blend in with your surroundings, but it doesn't really work on a miniature, and yeah, I think it kind of shows that I'm flagging here as I'm finishing this miniature. So, you know, just pointing out that you guys voted for this miniature. So even though it was great personal pain, I have painted him up. So this is what they look like, finally painted up. And did I enjoy it? I think it's quite evident that I did not. These miniatures were over-engineered for the time. They tried to put too much detail in, and the detail then became very cloudy and murky, and it was hard to pick out what each thing was. You know, that sort of classic problem when they try to put too much detail into old metal cast miniatures. Could I have painted him up better? Probably, if I if I just grinned and bared it, maybe I could have painted him up better. But this is a showcase of, you know, sometimes you do paint stuff and you're not going to be happy with it, and you didn't enjoy the process, even if you love painting like myself. The guy I'm showing here, the guy that you guys voted on, he does look marginally better than the other dude. He kind of pops a bit better. Again, did I enjoy it? No. Am I happy with the end result? No. But I'm happy that I got him done. So yeah, that's it. I've done my duty to you, and I painted up this miniature. Thank you all for voting for him. So if you want to see more from me, you know, you can do the usual, subscribe to my channel. If you want to comment, I do reply to every single comment left on my channel, which there'll probably be a lot of complaints that I'm moaning so much about this miniature. So I am ready for it. I'm braced. And if you liked this video, please leave a like. But until next time, it's going to be goodbye from me, Welsh Miniature Bull.